What is up? Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Matt Forte. We are here live at the Build studio in New York City. Oh, man, guys, this next guest, this first guest, let me just, Mallrats, Chase and Amy, Dogma, Comic Book Men, Red State, Tusk, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, The Secret Stash. How many of y'all been The Secret Stash? You know what's up, right? Yeah, of course. Guys, this dude has been birthing content out into the world since the early 90s, man. With Clerks, his attempt to put him and his friends on screen was so successful that, in fact, he put all of us up there. And now, we won't let him stop. He's a filmmaker, actor, comedian, comic book writer, author, podcaster, and most recently, still alive. Thank freaking God. That last bit out of context might not make sense. Let me see. Back in February, he got on stage at the Alex Theater in Glendale to perform the first of 2 planned stand-up shows, right? But right after the first show ended, he has a near-fatal heart attack, the Widowmaker, as they call it. And the special shot that night, Kevin Smith, Silent but Deadly. That's the one you'll see when it premieres Friday, May 11th at 9 p.m. Eastern and Pacific time on Showtime. I got a chance to see it. It's hilarious. It's uplifting. It's honest. Maybe a little too honest, but I'd expect nothing less. Here to tell us all about it, Mr. Kevin Smith is in the house. How about that, guys? Come on. Kevin Smith. We're going to bring him out here in just a second, but before we do, I believe we have a quick look at the special, so let's go ahead and run that clip.
We were shooting late again, like it was 1 in the morning. And so, you know, I was bored again on set at a certain point. Everybody's working, I don't really have anything to do. So I was like, maybe I'll go get him some fucking burgers. Like I've been going to A&W like 3 nights in a row. And since I stay away from sugar, I've been trying not to succumb to the temptation because like, I love root beer. It's one of my favorite things in the world. I love sugar. I love sugar on anything. You put it on dog shit, I'm like, this is the best. But root beer is one of my favorites, and they market it so well, like the orange and brown just like makes you salivate and shit, like a Pavlovian response. And all these days and nights, I've been able to not fucking get a root beer, but I'm like, it's fucking 2 in the morning, man, and like, you're buying everyone these burgers, and like, it's like your mom said, you're a good boy, you know? Like, you deserve a treat, man. Why don't you get yourself a fucking root beer, champ, you know? And I was like, let me add to that, man. I want to add 1 small diet root beer. And he starts laughing, the guy in the ordering box. I said, what's the matter? He goes, look at the screen. And I look at the screen, it says 70 mama burgers, 40 French fries, 20 onion rings, 1 small diet root beer. He goes, that looks like the worst diet ever attempted.
Ladies and gentlemen, make some noise, Kevin Smith.
Hello. Hello, thank you. Excellent to be here, man. I think I've done 2 builds. And last time, it was me and my kid, which she still talks about to this day.
Oh, no way,
Yeah,
man.
she's like, you were so fucking embarrassing. So it'll be nice to do it here without somebody judging me afterwards.
Well, I mean, that's the perfect scenario, isn't it, man?
Yeah.
You just come out and do your thing.
No judgment.
No
I think that's
judgment.
what we're all looking for in life.
all we're
But it's a judgy world, and so that's why we engage on that level and stuff. Really, if people would just flip that script and be less judgmental and more like praise, like fucking look at those shoes, it's amazing. Women are like that. Yeah. I watch like my wife interact with not strange women, like they're fucked up, but stranger women all the time. And they'll sit there and be like, oh my God, I love your shoes, I love your bag. And like, I would never be like that normally, and after years of watching that happen, now I feel free, like when I tell people all the time, like, oh, I love your shoes. And people are like, ew, you're a foot fetishist. But no, it's just, you know, don't be judgy, I guess.
You ever do that with Muse and shit? Just walk up, hey, dude, man, good shoes today.
I'm judgy with Muse. You know, you got to keep him on a fucking short leash, otherwise he's back to heroin and stuff. So, yeah, no, I tend to be a little more judgy with him.
Well, dude, man, congratulations on this special, on your health, man, on being here with us. And
yeah, that was awesome. That part of it, being above ground still is really the best part of fun, because I don't know what happens after you die, but I'm relatively sure you don't get to do shit like this anymore. So it's nice to still be able to do this.
Yeah, well, it's nice to still get some shit like this from you, man. I gotta ask you, it's been called a stand-up special, and you do stand-up now. But I remember back in '02, one of the first things me and my lady ever watched was an evening with Kevin Smith, where the length on that was like 4 hours. And you just telling stories, doing Q&A and stuff. And you've done similar things over the years. How has it changed for you, man? How do you approach these sort of engagements now versus back in the day? Are you going to clubs and running stories and shit?
Yeah, I basically, like, at a certain point, you know, a few years ago, God, many years ago at this point, when we made Red State, I was kind of frustrated with the state of movie marketing. It costs way too much to market a movie. It costs, like, in the case of Clerks 2, we made that movie for $5 million. It cost $10 million to release it. And I'm like, this don't make sense. It always bugged me. So with Red State, like, I was like, I'm gonna take it out and tour it myself and stuff. And I kind of stepped away from movies after that. I was just like, I'm done with this. And then 3 years later, I wound up making Tusk, that walrus movie, and that kind of brought me back. And people were like, I wish you'd stayed away. But like when I was, like when I stepped away from flicks, I was like, well, that money's like heroin. Like all of a sudden people pay you to make pretend for a living and you get acclimated to that very quickly. And suddenly that was going away. Movies overpay you to, to try to be entertaining for a living. And saying goodbye to that money was a big lifestyle change, but I was like, well, like, I don't want to do that job now just because it's like, well, I need the money and shit. Like, that's not why I got into it in the first place. I wanted to be a filmmaker. So I didn't want to presume upon that wonderful relationship that had given me so much by being like, now I'll just do it and phone it in and collect a check or something like that. So I had to figure out something else to do. And because of the movies, like when you go to a film festival, you wind up talking a bunch, like, because they throw you out after the movie and like, fucking explain yourself. And so you have to sit there and do Q&A. So over the time of doing that, I just, I discovered like, oh, I love talking. Like I'd always loved stand-up comedy and stuff. I was a big George Carlin fan, put him in the movies, of course, later on in life. But as a kid, I loved his ability to stand up on stage, speak his mind, mix it in with truth by way of vulgarity. He was a guy that would just like drop in F-bombs and not to seem cool, just, it accentuated what he was saying. And like I watched Carlin at Carnegie like with my parents. That was the first time I'd ever seen him. I'd heard him on albums. My father would give me comedy albums and stuff. And, my mom wouldn't let him give me albums where people cursed. So Carlin albums I couldn't have. My mom was like, you can only have the clean, good comedians like Bill Cosby. So I had a lot of those albums. And then my dad snuck me Carlin. He was like, don't let your mom hear you listening to this. And I fell in love with Carlin, his language. He had such a command of the language. So one day, like we first got cable in our neck of the woods, like 1981, 82. And so my father, I remember, was like, George Carlin's going to be telling jokes on HBO for an hour. It was so new, we didn't have the technology or the terminology to be like, oh, there's a George Carlin special going to be on. It was so new. We were like, funny man on TV, talk long, like fucking cavemen and shit. So I said to my dad, I was like, can we watch it? And he said, yeah, we're going to watch it. And my mom was like, I don't know, Don. She goes, George Carlin, I think he curses a lot. And my dad goes, oh, don't worry, Grace, that's my mom's name. He goes, don't worry, Grace, George Carlin is Catholic. And so with that, we gathered to watch George Carlin the night they aired the Carlin and Carnegie special. My dad's sitting on the couch eating a TV dinner. My mom's sitting in the Barca Lounger. She's eating a TV dinner. I was laying on the floor on my belly watching the TV like this. I'd already finished my TV dinner and stuff. And then it began, and George comes out, and the first joke he makes is, have you ever noticed that people are against abortion are people you wouldn't want to fuck in the first place? And the whole fucking place lights up laughing. And my dad was dying, and my mom was sitting there going, I don't think this is very funny at all. And my dad goes, calm down. And she goes, no, it's not good for the kid to hear this. It'll make him ask questions. And my dad goes, no, it won't. And I turned to my dad, I was like, Dad, what's abortion? And my mom was like, see? And she stormed out of the fucking room and stuff. So it was just me and my dad. And I was like, should we stop watching it? And he goes, no, let's keep watching. So we kept watching. And then my mom came back later on when George started talking about like Tippy the farting dog and Rice Krispies floating in the milk, some of the more tamer stuff that he did. But I watched his magical effect on my parents. People weren't allowed to curse in our house. We were pretty Catholic and stuff. My mom didn't even say hell. She would say H-E double hockey sticks. So the notion of like us sitting there and watching this man who was dropping some of the foulest language I'd ever heard in my life, and still to this day I've probably heard. And he didn't get in trouble like by my parents. They weren't like, shut this off. My father would interact with the screen. He'd be like, tell him, George. He was one of those guys. And even my mom liked farting dog humor and stuff. So I watched this guy's effect on my parents, and the biggest effect it had on me was, like, I learned that day, like, you can curse in life as long as you have something substantial to say in addition to it. Like, you don't have to work it clean. You can fucking be yourself. You could curse like this fucking guy. But you also have something to say. You got to have something to say. You can't just like, I'm cursing for the sake of fucking cursing. So it made a big impact and stuff. And so because on the film festival circuit, when they push you out there to talk about the movie, I grew up watching comedy. Like, I didn't want to get up and answer questions in a dry way. I didn't think of myself as like an auteur, as a filmmaker, so it was like, I'm not gonna pretend that I know what I'm doing. I made one fucking movie. So I went the other way. I was like, let me just tell them fun stories about how we made the movie. Like, instead of talking about, like, you know, was black and white a statement? You know, I didn't want to be like, no, black and white was cheap. So instead, it would just be, I would tell stories like, let me tell you how we got that cat to shit on cue. You know, and everybody was like, ooh, how did that happen? And so you start making them laugh, and you could be a little informative and stuff, but like chiefly entertain. Like, that's what I learned from Carlin. It's like, somebody puts a microphone in your hand and sits you in front of a bunch of people. Do your damnedest, be entertaining. Be honest, that helps too. But like, try to be entertaining.
To this day, looking at the career that you've sort of made over the years, have you cursed in front of your mom to this day?
I do,
Yeah.
and there was a moment where the dynamic shifted, like where I couldn't curse in front of my mom, and then after Clerks, I could, but not after I made the movie. She saw the movie, and my mother's reaction to my first film was, "Oh my God, you spent $27,000 on that piece of garbage." Which is like, you know, I would get those reviews later in my life from the New York Times and stuff, but like at that point in my life, that was my mom. Like, but she couldn't understand it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, not like she was stupid or something, but nobody had ever done anything like that in our world. Nowadays, you know, kids make films on their iPhones, like literal kids and shit like that. And everyone understands that film is more democratized. Anybody can pick up a camera and tell a story and shit. But when I did it in our particular little section of the world, even though we were 1 hour away from New York, where everything fucking happens, living in New Jersey, the notion to my parents of like, you're gonna make a movie and somehow people are gonna see it, like, I might as well have told them, like, I'm gonna be a fucking astronaut, like, after all this time, I just decided. So they didn't really get their heads around it until the movie got picked up, until, like, you know, Miramax picked up the movie. Then my mother understood. Like, when we had a premiere here in Los Angeles, here in New York, when the movie came, right before it came out, but it was down in Tribeca, and it was at the Pig and Whistle. That was where we had our after party and stuff. So my mom, you know, I was like, you gotta come up. My mom came, and the ET was there, Entertainment Tonight, which was a huge deal before the internet. Like, if you loved entertainment, that's where you got your news and shit like that, and I grew up watching it. So they were interviewing me, and they were like, your mom's here? Can she be in the interview? And I was like, oh my God, totally. So I pulled my mom into the interview as well, and like, you just saw her demeanor change completely. Like, this is where I belong, you know, like she, like, speaking my mind and shit. So after that, you know, when people were talking about, like, they were like, what do you think of the language? Because we got an NC-17 for the language at the time. And my mom was like, well, you know, it's not the way I speak, but it's how him and his friends talk, and I understand that I guess somebody likes that or whatever. So she slowly came to grips with it. So after that, I just started peppering my conversation. It wasn't even peppering. I didn't clean up my act for my mother. So I just started talking to her more like I talk to my friends. I'll be honest with you, it was a better relationship. It was the moment when you know, she stopped being just my mother, right, and she became a contemporary. Yes, right? Like, suddenly we were both adults and shit. Exactly. And she still don't curse. It never rubbed off on her and stuff. Maybe in traffic, if somebody cuts her off, she'll get vulgar. But generally speaking, no. She's happy to let me do all the cursing for the family.
I love the idea of her stepping on camera for the first time and immediately, like, perfect media-trained response. Well, it's not my preferred way, but it's still... Yeah.
She was good,
she was
bro.
ready to go.
She was, and it's funny because she don't come from that world. Like, she's not a public speaker. Even in church, like when we were kids, she wasn't like the person that went up and did a reading or something like that. But suddenly she was just like, oh, people are interested in the little fat son of mine? Like, and we were off and running. She's great. She remains my biggest fan to this day.
I want to talk a little bit, if we can, about some of the stuff that's in the special, man. We saw a clip, the end of a great story about a time you were directing on, I forget if it was Supergirl,
yeah.
right? Which, you've done a bunch of TV, man, Supergirl, Flash, Goldbergs, and all that.
Yeah. And
you talk a lot about how it's a different gig for you when you're doing the TV shows, because it demands a different skill set, if you will.
It requires no skill whatsoever.
Exactly.
I mean, for me, people who work on the show are very skilled, but if you look at the credits of your favorite shows or any shows whatsoever, generally speaking, you'll see the same cast and crew credits, but the director credit changes from episode to episode. And that, to me, and once I did the job, and I'm not taking anything away from TV directors, I am one myself, but it shows you how superfluous a TV director is to a show that's been up and running for more than a year. Once you have that show running for a year, everybody knows how to do it. It becomes an assembly line, not in a bad way, but just like we do this at this time, we do this at this time, we do this at this time. You're working with expert craftspeople across the boards, cast and crew, who know how to do that job insanely well. After season 1, they've done it 22, 23 times. Yeah. So they've got it down to a science. Last thing they need is somebody who's coming in going, I got a vision. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it would be weird for me to show up on a show and be like, this week we're changing the look. It's all one shot, black and white, like Clerks. You know, that would be bad. People watching the show at home be like, why is this show fucked up and terrible in 90s now and stuff? And so I can't walk up to the directors and to the actors and tell them how to do their jobs. Think about it. I get a script maybe a week, 2 weeks before I get to direct the episode. So yeah, I get to read it and digest it. But the cast, they play these characters every episode. Like, they've forgotten more about playing these characters and insight into their portrayals than I'll ever be able to provide as an outsider. So I can't walk up to like Melissa on Supergirl and be like, I'm a 47-year-old man and you're a 26-year-old woman. Let me tell you how to play Supergirl. Like, it's just not. So I've found my way to live in that world is just I let people do their thing. I don't enforce my will on the show. I don't try to change shit. I'm like, how do you guys normally do it? Let's do it like that, and let's just do it as quickly as possible.
How did you learn that? Like, because you had to. There was a first time.
You know, honestly,
did this,
it's conversation. Like, you talk to people who do the job on a regular basis. Tyler, who is a production designer on Flash, and then went over to Supergirl, like, held my hand throughout my first episodes. Like, he walked me through the world and stuff. And he, you know, we got into a conversation about one of the directors who had followed me. They'd started basically you start pre-production and you do that for like 9 days and then you start production and then they start pre-production with the next director and it keeps going. So he was talking about a director that had come in with a lot of plans for the show. And, you know, they try politely, because they're all Canadian and you shoot it up in Canada. They try very politely to explain, like, that's not going to fly. Like, you know, pun intended, it's Supergirl, but like, they don't like this, thank you. They don't like this in Los Angeles. The producers like the show produced this way. So to have somebody come in and enforce their style on it, that's not good. You got to do their show. Like, I'm not there to make Clerks again or one of my things. If I want to do that, I can fuck off and do that. But when you're there, you got to color within the lines and play the ball where it lays. So I just tend to be super supportive of the crew. Like, you know, like after my first episode of The Goldbergs, I talked to Adam Goldberg. He's the guy that created the show, and it's based on his life and stuff. The clips at the end of the show, that's him and his family when he was a kid. So I directed for one whole day, and directed. And so I saw him, and I was like, he goes, how'd it go? I said, it went great, dude, but like, I can't do this. Like, I'm not taking your money. You just donated to charity. It's ridiculous to say that I did anything. I literally watched people make the Goldbergs all day long. It was fun, but I added nothing to it. And he goes, no, that's bullshit. He's going, I talked to all the cast and most of the crew. He's going, and they all talked about how you were clapping. And you made everybody clap. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you were clapping. And I did. After every take, I was like, oh my God, people lied to us and we believed it. Give it up for the actors and shit like that. And he's like, people don't do that. And I was like, what do you mean? It makes sense. If people act, you clap, as we do in the theater and shit like that. He goes, nobody does it. This is a job for most people. They've been doing it for fucking years. We're in season 4 right now. So, like, they do this every day, and nobody does what you did, man. So they were all enthused. They were all happy because you were clapping and shit. I was like, but clapping's not directing. I didn't go to film school, and they weren't like, clap. That's the fucking key. But he goes, I said, I feel like a fraud. And he goes, dude, if the cast and crew are happy, the work is instantly better. Everything gets fucking lifted. And if they're happy because you're fucking clapping at the end of a take, then you're the director, and that's the fucking job. Collect your money and shut the fuck up and stuff. So, you know, at that point, I was like, all right, I'm the clapper. So I've done that, and then I started bringing, like, food, like, to the set. So that's what that story is about.
It's in the special.
You have to find your way, like, where you fit best in that world. And believe me, it's not like I just lay around and do nothing. I will have an opinion, but I will never derail the show for my opinion. Like, I'll never be like, my way is the right way. I'm there because I love what they do. I watched for a full season, and I was like, this is breathtaking television. I'd love to do one of these. And so when they let you in, it'd be weird to be like, oh, it's mine now? You know, just piss on it for the sake of making it yours. Yeah, the challenge is to make I keep pointing at this, I don't know why. The challenge is to make their show, and it's fun to do it, man. And it's a very easy job, especially if you're a fan of the material. Yeah. Like, I don't go on to shows that I don't watch. That would make no sense.
Right.
So at least in something like Supergirl or Flash, I could bring something to it, like from comics, like remembering some line or some reference. Ooh, let's say this or something. Like on the last episode of Flash I did, in the opening, they were talking about comedy, and Ralph, who plays the elongated man character, Hartley plays Ralph Dibny. He was talking about like, hey man, we can improv and take our act on the road and stuff like that. And so our last take, I was like, do me a favor, do one more take and be like, we could even take it to Washington and be the DC Comics. And he was like, that's good. And they kept it in the show. So I was like, all right. So you throw in little cool ideas, but you really can't bring much to it that hasn't been brought there before you by all the people that helped shape it, make it what it is.
Right, for sure. I want to talk too about, I mean, obviously we're leaning into it with the marketing here. You do a little intro right in the beginning of the special. This is the special. These are the moments that transpire prior to your heart attack.
Yeah, I was shooting this show before. We were supposed to shoot 2 shows that night. It was this show. It was supposed to do an hour and an hour, but the first show I wound up doing 2 hours. And so when I got off stage, the director, Brian, was just like, you know, we can cut the whole special out of that 2 hours. You don't even have to do the second one. And I was like, everybody's here, man. I got 2 hours of different material. Let's do it. So I went in the back to just chill out between the shows, and I started feeling like really unwell, but not like, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack. I just felt nauseated, you know, and then I felt very sweaty, but I sweat when I fucking breathe, so I didn't think that was an issue. And so I asked everybody to leave the room and then kind of laid down on the floor and threw up a little bit, but it was just bile. Then I felt a little better. Then I asked Emily to come back in. She's the person that does my hair, which is fucking stupid because I wear a hat, but she's very good at her job. So I said, hey man, can you plug in a hairdryer and just like dry me off? I feel like I'm really sweating. And so she's drying me off, and she felt my neck. She's like, your neck is freezing cold. She's like, I touch your neck all the time. It's usually warm. She's like, you feel very cold. Are you okay? And I was like, I just don't feel well. I didn't think I was having like a fucking major episode. I just felt like maybe I drank some bad milk. So I had some milk when I got off stage. And I was like, maybe somebody spit in the fucking milk. They're like, fuck Kevin Smith. So I've chalked it up to that. And finally, like about a half an hour later, man, I was trying to lay down, get comfortable on a couch. And I said to Jordan, Jason Muse's wife runs our company. She was there. I was like, you know, I don't know if I can do that second show. I feel bad. And she was like, we canceled it already. I was like, why the fuck did you cancel the second show? And she's like, because I've never seen you sick. This is really scary. And I said, yeah, maybe I should see a doctor. And she said, the doctors are closed. It's Sunday. I said, fuck, what do we do? She's like, I called an ambulance. I was like, oh, God, why would you do that? I was like, don't fucking call an ambulance. They're going to find out I'm just too high. I smoked way too much weed today. That's what this is. I was like, fuck, this is embarrassing. And they came in there before, when you call paramedics, the fire department shows up. And 6 brawny-ass firemen came down into the room where I was. And I was sitting in the chair holding my arms up because I was trying to catch my breath. I couldn't catch my breath. Like, I didn't feel like something dire was happening. I was like, this is weird. I can't catch my breath. So I had my arms up. And out of the 6 firemen, like 4 of them were younger. So they were like looking at me like, is that Silent Bob celebrating a touchdown? Because I was sitting there like that and shit like that. And then the paramedics came in, and one guy put the blood pressure cuff on me, started taking that. And the lady had this box that has leads and wires in it. She puts it down. She's like, I'll put these on you. I said, okay. And I was sitting in the chair, and she goes and just lifts my shirt up, which for a fat guy is like, you might as well put a stake through my heart, man. That's just like, once you lift the shirt up, every roll comes out and stuff. So I was like, whoa, and I yanked it down. She's like, I gotta get these leads on you, man. And I was like, well, you can't just lift my shirt up, man. That's my fucking friend's wife over there. She never seen my tits. Nobody's seen my tits. I said, my wife of 19 years has never seen me with my shirt off. I was like, I keep my shirt off in the shower. You understand? She's like, I got these wires on you. And I was like, well, I will hold out the shirt, and then you reach up underneath and use my nipples as landmarks and fucking put the shit on me and shit. I was so, like, I'm not modest. I have body shame issues. Like, it's not like, oh, I don't want people to see my nude. Believe me, if I had a rockin' bod, I'd fucking be naked right now. But I don't, so I got body shame issues.
Smaller jersey collection.
Exactly. Or probably not even a jersey, let's be honest. But because the jersey's like a fat guy's moo-moo, so that's why I wear it. So for me, that was the bigger deal. I was like, oh my God, like fucking, there's too many people around and there's too much exposure going on right now. And they were like, we're gonna take you to the hospital. And I was like, oh, don't do that. Why? And they were like, it's close, man. It's real close. Like, we should just do it just to be safe. But they're like, you ever been to a hospital before, Mr. Smith? And I was like, I've visited people. I said, but I've never been in. He's like, oh, you're gonna love it. It's so much fun. And so I was like, okay. And he's like, you ever been in an ambulance before? I was like, no. And he's like, oh, you're gonna go for the ride of your life. We gotta get you into this chair. And so I go to get up, and he goes, no, you can't get up. We're going to put you in that chair. I said, how? And the 6 fucking firemen came over and put their hands under my fat ass and picked me up and lifted me into the other chair. And it was the most fucking fun I'd had in like 10 years. Because nobody ever tries to pick me up anymore. When you're a kid, they pick you up, swing you around and shit. But like as an adult, nobody does that. And suddenly 6 adults were like, picking me up. I was, wee! So far it wasn't so good, man. They got me into the ambulance. And they had told the crowd for the next show that I had food poisoning because I threw up. So they're like, we have to cancel the show. He has food poisoning because nobody knew that I was having a heart attack. So as they were wheeling me into the ambulance, there were a bunch of people from the next show going, Cav, feel better. And there was one guy going like this. He was like, ugh. And he was talking about me throwing up and having food poisoning, but I didn't understand it. And I was like, is he telling me to suck his dick? Like, they're putting me in an ambulance, you fucking horrible fuck. Ask me when I'm not going to an ambulance or something like that. Yeah, really, fucking learn your place. So when I got there, man, that was when I found out I was having a heart attack in the ER. Dr. Leidenheim, I met him. They wheeled me in. He goes, hey, how are you? I was like, feel great, man. I was like, you can't really catch my breath. It feels weird and stuff. He goes, what's your pain threshold? And 0 to 10. I was like, -3. He goes, are you sure? And I said, yeah, I'm telling you, I smoked too much weed this morning. I think that's why I'm here. And he goes, no, you're having a massive heart attack. I said, what? He goes, yeah, right now, you're in the middle. They didn't tell you? I said, no, nobody told me anything, man. They just tried to take my shirt off. And he was just like, you're having a massive heart attack. We're going to get you up to the OR and look at you as quickly as possible because if it's what I think it is, we got to go to work. So I'll see you upstairs and shit. And he left, and this dude comes in with a bucket. He goes, hey, man, I got to shave your groin so the doctor could go up your groin, so why don't you take off your jorts? And so, you know, I took off my jean shorts and shit, but I left my underwear on. He's like, you got your underwear on? I was like, yeah. He goes, you got to take those off. I was like, why? He goes, I got to shave your groin. I was like, well, it depends. What is the groin to you? Define the groin. And he's like, well, you know, it's between your leg and your body and shit. I was like, all right, that's fine. I was like, I can work with you. What I'm going to do is pull my underwear off to the side, and then you shave a landing strip right there, and then I'll do it to the other side. And he goes, bro, we ain't got time for this. And I was like, my man just told me I had a heart attack. If you make me take my underwear off in front of all these people in the ER, I will have a second fucking heart attack right here. And he's like, why? And I was like, because remember, my first biggest fear is I don't want to die. My second biggest fear is strangers seeing my dick. It's small. So I said, in the hospital, that's going to increase. You tell me to take my shit off. And he goes, all right. And so he shaved around where I moved my underwear and stuff. And then they took me up to the OR. And the first thing the doctor said, he's like, why is this man wearing his underwear? And the guy who shaved me was like, he won't take them off. He says he's got body shame issues. And I was like, yeah, doc, I don't want anyone seeing my dick. It goes way back. He goes, we ain't got time for this. And he grabs my underwear and fucking yanks them off my body and shit. Like I was in a 70s porno, man. I was like, whoa! My shit was all exposed. And then they went for my shirt, my hockey jersey. He's like, you got to get that off. And even though they were pumping me full of fentanyl and shit, I was still at the presence of mind to lie. I made up a story. I was like, I can't take this jersey off. It's my lucky hockey jersey, and I need it if I'm going to have this operation. And nobody had the presence of mind to be like, it can't be lucky you had a fucking heart attack in it. They didn't give a fuck. They just cut my shit off. And then I was naked, just laying there fucking naked. First time I've been completely naked since I was born in a fucking hospital. Wow. Like, I've had clothes on my whole fucking life. So I was like, you have your will of me. And then he told me, he went up my fucking groin. It's crazy. He disappeared into my crotch and made magic and shit. You can't say that about every man you ever meet and shit. So
small list.
It's it was a small dick as well. So he came up and he goes, whoa, it's what I thought. 100% blockage in your widowmaker. And he goes, in your LAD. I said, what's that? He goes, it's the artery that goes across the front of your heart. He goes, you're a comic book guy. I said, yeah. He goes, they call it the widowmaker. And I said, why? And he goes, because in 80% of the cases of 100% blockage, people die. He's going, but you're going to be in the 20% because I'm good at my job. And I was like, and I didn't freak out because I was stoned. And so I was like, I said, doc, do me a favor. He goes, yeah. I said, save my life if you can. He goes, I'll try. And he disappeared back into my crotch and fucking went to work and stuff. And I just laid there on the table and thought about my life and stuff. Because, 80-20, shitty odds, man. Yeah. Like, all of a sudden I was like, oh, shit. You leave the house, is 50-50, something bad's gonna happen. But like 80-20, like if you had those odds every time, you'd fucking call in for everything. So I was sitting there going, what do you do, man, if this is the end? And I was like, do I start bargaining with God? I was raised Catholic and shit like that. But at the same time, I was like, I know Jesus is gonna be like, you made dogma, die, bitch. So I wasn't, buddy Christ, fuck your fat ass, So I didn't ask Jesus for any help or anything. And instead, I just thought about, well, if this is the end, what do you feel? How are you feeling? Like, assess. And I'm a writer. That's what you do. You're always assessing. God bless you. You're always just like, all right, let's assess this moment. And this was a big moment because this is the one I was most terrified of. Closest to death that I was ever, as far as I know, that I ever was. And I wasn't like fucking scared. That was the thing I always figured I'd be like terrified. Like they'd have to drag me out of this life with my fingernails clawed into the earth because life like worked out for me and it's been fun and shit like that. So the notion of it ending, when you're creative, I'm sure like everybody, nobody wants to die, but when you're a creative person, when you're a writer or whatever the fuck, there's this like utter indignity to the idea of death because you're like, I have so much more to say. How could I die like a normal person and shit like that? You forget your art doesn't mean you're going to be, your art could live forever. You are finite. So I sat there going like, well, how do you feel? And I was grateful. I wasn't mad. I wasn't sitting there like, this is too young and blah, blah, blah. I was just like, wow, man, what an adventure. Like it was, like I remember how it began, where I came from. I still know the same people, like, and then I had this weird, wonderful job that kept changing all the time and stuff. I had a wife and a kid, like I had a family, like I did it. I did the fucking menu. And so at that point I was like, if this is it, if you're gonna fucking die tonight, like, you know, yeah, 47's fucking young, but maybe that's the price you pay for the life you've led. And not like a hard party in life, I didn't do that, but like you had like wonderful things happen to you at a very young age. And at a very young age, you didn't have to act like anybody else anymore. You got to act like yourself. Like for a living, personally and professionally, you just got to be you. And that's what everybody should aspire to in life. Like not to be somebody else's person, but your own person that you're like, this is who I am, this is what I do. I was like, what a great fucking life you've had. Like you were loved and you loved people and fucking you made movies that worked and made movies that didn't work. You saw all ends of the spectrum. You had things were successful and things that didn't. I was like, if this is the end and the ferryman comes tonight, man, like fucking pay him and don't bitch and get on the boat because you had it good. Like I thought about, I was a big fan, comic book fan obviously, but when Neil Gaiman started the Sandman run of books, when he first introduced the character of Death, and Morpheus' sister, Death, personified as a goth girl wearing an ankh necklace with the black hair and shit like that. And he meets her in Washington's, I think it was Union Square Park, Washington Square Park, and they walk around New York for the day. And, you know, slowly, they don't tell you right up front she's Death. You slowly figure out throughout the issue that she's Death. And she's escorting these people like a baby dies, a kid dies, a guy dies, an old guy dies. And the old guy who dies is bitter about it. And he's just like, you know, I did all this and what for? What did I get? And the Death character says something that like stuck with me forever. It made an impact when I was a kid, but like means more now in middle age and shit. The character said, you got what everybody gets. You got a life. And I sat there going, I got a life, man. It was good. So if it ends, it ends. And then Dr. Leidenheim saved my life. I was like, fuck, I'm still here. So now I'm here for a little bit longer doing this kind of shit.
Well,
but I like to share that story just by virtue of the fact that everyone's scared of death. Like, you know, like it's the thing that we don't, it's Voldemort, the thing we do not name and the thing we don't want to fucking talk about, but it's omnipresent in our lives and stuff. I was one of those guys that pushed it as far away from me as possible. Having been there on the precipice wasn't bad. Now, granted, I wasn't in physical pain, so there are versions of a heart attack where people are like dire agony. But facing death, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Like at the end of the day, there was a weird, I don't know if it's because I was pumped full of fentanyl or because I'd smoked a fuck ton of weed that day, but I was laying on the table going like, wow, this was fun. I hope I get to do it again, but if this was the only time, no complaints. So yeah, even though we're all scared of death, you never know. In that final moment, you might be like, right on, I did it. Like I'm there. It was okay.
Fucking right on, man. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that story.
God, no worries.
With us, man.
I'll be sharing that for a
and
while.
Congratulations, and thanks for making this special and putting it out and sharing it with us.
It's a
man.
fun way to
It's a
watch this show
fantastic
is get a fucking bottle of booze, and every time you think I'm having a symptom of a heart attack, take a shot.
Not only did you center the art around the heart, you've developed a drinking game to go along with it as well. Fantastic.
I hear alcohol is good for the heart.
Kevin, obviously I could do this with you all day, man, but I got to let you go. We're running out of time. I want to thank you so much for being here, dude. Guys, make some noise for Kevin Smith.
Thank you, folks.
Showtime, May 11th, 9 p.m. All right, check it out.